We are here with Mike Pollock, who is the Managing Director of Spectrum Gaming, which probably, Mike, it would be no exaggeration to say, has become the leading consultancy in the gaming industry.
Very kind of you.
And Mike each year publishes top 10 trends, I guess they might be, in the gaming industry. We are going to discuss a few of those. But before we do, Mike, let's talk about the industry as a whole. Gaming has been subject to a number of significant external forces the past year or two. We've had the evolution of COVID, we've got inflation, we've had supply chain disruptions, we have, for some companies, foreign currency exchange issues. How do you see the health and the resilience of the gaming industry?
I think the health and resilience of the gaming industry, we can basically say, is as strong as it possibly could be. If you think about it, and if you look at the history of the modern gaming industry over the past 40 years, it's dealt with every calamity you could imagine. If you look at the Great Recession, we survived that. Now we're clearly dealing with COVID, where there was a time where every casino in the US was closed. The resiliency is clear. The industry bounced back because human nature hasn't changed. People still want the same form of entertainment they wanted pre-COVID, but it also created opportunities and a little bit of insight that we didn't have before, is that it forced, to a greater degree than we had anticipated, that we would be testing how much people would want to play from home. And can you get new markets out of that? And then can you convert those new markets into the old markets, get them inside properties to be entertained. So the resiliency is there. I don't subscribe to the notion that gaming is recession proof. Very few industries are. To a certain extent, obviously gaming depends on the levels of discretionary spending and how people feel about the economy and so forth. It's not immune to changes in interest rates, which obviously the Fed is imposing, as we speak here today, more and more to fight inflation. To a certain degree, gaming is inflation. I'm not going to say inflation proof, but inflation resistant. Casinos don't respond to inflation the way a retail business would. You know, a $5 craps table does not become a $6 craps table. You just if there are still $5 craps tables out there, for that matter. But you know, people still, human nature has not changed. And I think that no matter what calamities come down the pike, the gaming industry is sufficiently experienced, sufficiently capitalized, I think, to withstand them.
Well, James Maida yesterday from GLI said that he thought that COVID had accelerated change in gaming industry by 5 or 6 years. And we've talked to a few other CEOs who have concurred with that, not necessarily the 5 or 6 years part, but with the acceleration. One example being from the operator side is during that period when they were closed, as you mentioned, they had to decide how do you survive. And one of the things they learned is what they have to spend money on, what they don't have to spend money on. And so a lot of expenses have gone away because they discovered that, you know, we don't all need to have free buffets or buffets any longer. Have you seen that phenomenon as well?
I think what James has pointed out is absolutely spot on. I can concur. I think, I haven't thought about it, but I think a 5-year acceleration is certainly reasonable. But things like buffets, bus programs, and a lot of other things that were written into the DNA of how a casino markets itself have been reconsidered. Staffing levels in a lot of areas, housekeeping in all sorts of areas. So margins have effectively, you can say, they benefited from the insights gained from the COVID experience. I would agree. I would concur with that.
Okay. Now you got your trends, 10 trends. Let's pick the top three. What do you see?
Well, it was hard to get it down to 10, so now we've got to get it down to 3. And I would say from the standpoint of the gaming industry domestically, there's a couple that stand out. One is obviously the growth and the expected growth of iGaming. iGaming is where we're sitting here today at the tail end of 2022. I think within 5 years, you're going to have, there's 6 states that offer iGaming right now. I'm not counting Nevada. 6 states that offer iGaming right now, and that's going to clearly be somewhere in the 20 range within a fairly short period of time. We're overcoming the hurdles that have kept it at bay. One of those hurdles being that the fear that iGaming will cannibalize land-based gaming. We're seeing that it doesn't. Data is available to show that it doesn't, and we know why it doesn't. Because the experiences are different. iGaming creates a omni-channel marketing opportunity. So you're getting new customers, getting new players who would not otherwise. People aren't saying, I'm going to stay home on Friday night and gamble on my phone rather than come to a casino. It doesn't happen. What it does is create new opportunities to reach new adults and get them and market to them and get them to their property on a Friday night. Maybe not to gamble, at least not much, but to go see a show, to eat at a restaurant, to be out and about. That trend is here, it's real, and it's going to be everywhere that you have gaming, effectively. Another trend, a very important trend, is what we term the convergence of the lottery and the casino industries from separate industries into effectively 2 verticals within the same industry. That is a monumental shift. Historically, lotteries operated in their own silos. Casinos operated in theirs, and there was very little overlap. There's always concern about competition, always concern about that, but I mean, we're sitting here in Nevada, and it's no secret why Nevada does not have a lottery, because they would see it as competition. But what we're seeing right now is that they're essentially 2 verticals within the same industry, both moving toward a digital offering, in the same sense that we talked about how iGaming is going to be omnipresent, so is iLottery. And there's only a few states that offer iLottery. You can't have an industry as large as lottery. Same with gaming. You can't have industries that large that do not have a significant digital presence. Now, what does that mean? Why are they converging into one industry, 2 verticals within the same industry? Effectively because lotteries and iGaming, the iLottery and iGaming, there are points of, call it collision, call it competition, call it convergence. It has to be dealt with. And that is where an instant lottery ticket, the kind you scratch off and make a mess somewhere, and having a digital version of that and a digital slot machine, they're effectively identical. There's no way around that. They are. Does that mean that they both can't coexist? No, it means they have to coexist. But it's the same industry. And they're both face the same issue in that their traditional players aren't getting any younger. The traditional lottery player, same as the traditional slot player, not getting any younger. And that's gonna, they have to find new ways, and you have to have an omni-channel digital presence. I saved the best of the 3 for last. This is interesting because in a lot of states, you are seeing what I term to be a gray market. I term unregulated slot machines. Others will call them illegal. That's not necessarily the case in every state. Others will term them games of skill. And I use the word skill with kind of quote marks. You may have seen these in some of your travels. States like whether it's Virginia or Pennsylvania, Michigan, Missouri, Kansas, they're not games of skill.
Right.
They're not. They're gambling. They're slot machines. They're just not regulated. They're not licensed. They're not tested. They don't necessarily have to adhere to the rules that licensed and regulated operators and suppliers have to adhere to in the gaming world, be that AML controls, be that know your customer rules, be that underage gambling, be that problem gambling, be that dealing with exclusion lists and things like that. Don't exist in that world, at least not voluntarily or not mandatory. You would hope that they're voluntary, but I don't see that. So that's very seriously problematic for the gaming industry, for lotteries as well. And that's an area where it's an area of common concern for both lotteries and casinos. Because what these are, there's no limit on their number or locations. So you can have a casino in any of these markets, and there's a lot of states that have them. A block or two away from the casino, you've got these unregulated slot machines in a 7-Eleven, in a gas station, in a bar, whatever. The problem is, convenience is a factor in gaming. There's no getting around that. And if you just want to play slots for an hour or half hour or whatever, you can go 2 blocks to a 7-Eleven, or you can drive 20 minutes, half hour, whatever it is, to a casino. There's going to be some cannibalization. There's going to be. But I think more important, what these machines do, is they have the potential to undermine the licensing process that all states that offer gaming adhere to. And that's critically important. A license is a privilege. You and I can't just open a casino. We can't just buy a casino. It's a privilege that we have to demonstrate to regulators that we have earned by demonstrating our good character, honesty, and integrity. How does that compare if I can just put in a slot machines in my convenience store? What does that do to public confidence and policy, not to mention what it does to capital investment and a lot of other things? So those would be my top 3.
Okay, let's do a follow-up on each of them. On the proliferation of iGaming, sports betting, one of the concerns is the tremendous amount of advertising that's being done. Every 12-year-old kid in America who's watching a baseball game or a football game is seeing a lot of advertising directed at encouraging gambling, including a lot that's pretty aggressive. How do you see that playing out? We've seen in Europe where there have been caps put on, when advertising can take place, or even if it can, names on jerseys, how much money can be spent, all kinds of restrictions. How do you see that playing out in the U.S.?
I don't necessarily see it following the European model because they don't have a First Amendment in Europe, and that's a lot of it has to deal with the ability to say what you want in ways that you want and so forth. It's going to have to be more of a self-regulated function, and it's going to get to a point where the ROI on this advertising is just not going to be worth it. You're going to have to, by definition, have to see some change, and it has to come under the aegis of responsible gaming with respect to how you advertise, what you advertise, where you advertise. But it's not going to be. It can't. I just can't see it following the European model.
Before you came in, as you may know, we had Michael Daly of Catena here, which is an affiliate, and he's not the first person to say this, but one of the things he says is that their clientele, from a customer point of view, a retail point of view, is an identified gambler, and it's much easier, much safer to direct advertising or marketing directly to that person than it is to go to this broad general media approach of television and radio, and that if you're looking at it from an investor perspective, those might be the people the affiliates might be the people who benefit from a reduction in that broad-based kind of marketing.
It's an interesting thought, and I think we don't know yet. The jury's still out on a lot of that. But I think what I would agree with and what needs to be done is that because we're dealing with a relatively young, emerging industry in iGaming, and you're out there looking for new customers, initially you're going to have to take what I would term a shotgun approach. Just
Right.
spread it out there and see what comes in. It's very expensive to do that. Ultimately, you're going to get a much higher ROI and be much more responsible with your marketing dollars by taking more of a rifle approach, so that you're dealing with much more. You've narrowed the demographics of your target audience. So in that sense, I think there's some agreement.
On the lottery side, you have almost a merger of industries today, of media and gambling and sports, and a lot of these are merged. An example, and it's not lottery, but an example is Disney. Just a few years ago, Disney was adamantly opposed to anything to do with gambling, and now, as the owner of ESPN, they're just glad to have DraftKings run ads on their network.
Sure.
And one of the things we've heard from a number of the content provider companies, the games companies, is that they're offering games on digital now. That's a big growth area for them. And they're offering games, the games that they're running on digital, the games they're running in a casino, well, they can offer those games to lotteries as well. And so
Yes.
there's that opportunity for the games providers to have omnichannels, I guess is the term.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing, and one of the reasons attitudes change, Disney's change of attitudes, that should not be a surprise to anyone. And in part, it's an offshoot. It's the residue of years of licensure and licensing and strict internal controls and so forth that have governed this industry, that have given a little more confidence in parties such as Disney to get into gaming. Couple that with the potential for significant profits, and it's not just on the advertising. You may see them companies like that play a much more active role in all forms of gaming going forward, because they see it as a significant opportunity. We're just at the start of this. Now, another thing to point out is that corporate attitudes do change. This interview is being conducted in a property owned by Las Vegas, LVS. Sheldon Adelson, the late owner, was dead set against any form of digital gaming. Obviously, he's not around anymore, but that's not the case here, and attitudes change. Experience and other factors such as regulation and so forth can change attitudes, and that's something we will continue to see, and we're keeping a close eye on.
And then on your third topic, the proliferation of, for lack of another name, we might call it routes of distributed gaming.
Yeah.
Strikes a lot of people as really basically being in a turf wars in the industry, because in Missouri and Pennsylvania, the casinos really don't want to have slot routes come in. The guys who want slot routes are saying, let us come in, and that way you're going to have legitimate operations instead of these gray market operators. And we've seen this conflict cause legislation not to be enacted in states so far, in states like Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Missouri. How do you see this playing out? Is distributed gaming inevitable?
To a certain extent, the distributed gaming is already here, and I think you probably will see more of it. But you have to make a distinction between distributed gaming that you have, let's say, in Illinois, Louisiana, and other states, Nevada for that matter, where it's licensed, regulated, and you can't just put a slot machine in you've got to have a license. And there are some controls. Illinois has certain counties, you can have in certain locations up to 5 machines and so forth. You have to make a distinction between that licensed, regulated, and what I was referring to earlier as the unregulated, that do not have to abide by these rules, and consequently have an enormous advantage over not only the regulated casinos, but also the regulated slot routes. Now, one of the things and I think this is interesting, is that when you see these unregulated machines in certain states, you don't see them as, to a certain extent you will, but you don't see them as much in the states that have, like Louisiana or Illinois, that have the regulated distributed gaming, because then you've got a real tension,
Right.
and you've got a real battle that obviously the legal regulated version will more likely win out. But is distributed gaming a good policy? It's going to vary from state to state, and it's going to vary from policy to policy. It depends on what the state is. Could you do that in New Jersey? It'd be a terrible policy, because the gaming policy in New Jersey is the rebuilding of Atlantic City. That's the policy. That doesn't advance that. If in another state you have different form of gaming and your policy is just maximize state revenue, you'll come up with a different answer. But the policies are going to vary, so how the outcome emerges is going to vary.
So if you were a betting man, you come back 5 years, 10 years from now, we'll see a lot more legalized distributed gaming than we see today.
Legalized distributed gaming. More than you have today? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. How that's going to shape up and to what extent, I'm not going to, my crystal ball isn't, it's cloudy on that respect. But obviously you're going to see more than you have today. You're not going to cut back.
Right.
Gaming doesn't cut back, that's one thing. That's why I tell states, and we tell state legislators, when you make a decision, recognize there's no mulligans in gaming policy. You authorize distributed gaming, you can't take it back. You authorize casinos in a location, you can't take that back. So that's what they need to be aware of.
Right. Okay, great, very interesting. Mike, I'm sure if somebody wants to see all 10 of your trends, how will they do that?
Well, they can read the Fantini report from about a week ago, but if they don't have access to that, they go to spectrumgaming.com, and it'll be there.
Okay, great.
For the last 15 years.
Mike, it has been informative and insightful as usual. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank.